Ambassador Quellix of the Melurian Republic had not cried in public in 40 years of service. Not once. Not when negotiations failed. Not when alliances fractured. Not even when entire regions descended into conflict because words had not been enough. Control was the foundation of diplomacy. Emotion was managed, contained, hidden. Quellix had mastered that. He had built his career on it. The ambassador. He was one of the most respected diplomats in the Melurian Republic. Veteran of 11 interstellar negotiations. Recipient of 4 Galactic Service Awards. A figure known not for passion, but for precision. Measured words. Calculated pauses. Perfect control. He did not raise his voice. He did not lose composure. He did not break the treaty. The negotiations had lasted 12 years. 12. A border dispute between the Melurian Republic and a neighboring coalition. Not a war, but close enough. 3,000 Melurian families lived in the disputed zone. 3,000 lives suspended in uncertainty. Every delay mattered. Every misstep cost something real. Quellix had led the talks from the beginning. He knew every clause, every compromise, every fragile point of agreement. He believed, truly believed, that this session would end it. The collapse. It unraveled in less than an hour. A single disagreement, a shift in tone, a refusal to concede one final point. And suddenly, 12 years of work collapsed. Not gradually, not predictably, but completely. The room went cold. Words stopped meaning anything. And the treaty was gone. The weight. Quellix left the conference hall without speaking, without acknowledging anyone, without allowing himself to process what had happened. Because if he did, he might not be able to stop. He walked through the corridors of the station, past officials, past staff, past everything, until he found quiet place, the bench, corridor, unremarkable, neutral, a bench against the wall. He sat, slowly, carefully, as if even that required effort. Then, he lowered his head, and pressed his hands to his face. Silent grief. His species does not cry as humans do. There are no tears, no sound, no outward expression. Grief for Melurians is internal, contained, felt, but never seen. And in that moment, it felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Because there was no release, no outlet, just pressure, responsibility, 3,000 families, 3,000 lives, waiting, hoping, trusting. And now, another year of uncertainty, another year of waiting, another year of fear. And it was, in some small but undeniable way, his fault. The interruption. He did not hear the footsteps at first. They were too light, too small. But eventually, something shifted. Presence. He lowered his hands, looked up. The child, a human child, stood in front of him, perhaps 7 years old, holding a stuffed toy, looking at him with quiet curiosity, head slightly tilted, unafraid, uncertain, but present. The question, "Are you okay?" she asked. Simple, direct, unfiltered. Quellix straightened immediately. The mask returned. Professional, controlled. "I am fine," he said. "You should return to your guardian." The honesty. The child did not move. "You don't look fine," she said. There was no accusation in her voice, no judgment, just observation. And that was more difficult to deflect than any diplomatic challenge. The truth. Quellix hesitated, just for a moment, then said, "I am having a difficult day." The consideration. The girl took this seriously, very seriously. She looked at him, studied him, as if trying to understand something far beyond her years. Then, she made a decision. Benny. She held out her stuffed toy, a small, worn creature, mismatched eyes, one ear missing, well-loved, well-used, important. "When I have a bad day," she said. "Benny helps." The moment, Quellix looked at the toy, then at the child, then back at the toy. Something shifted. Not logically, not strategically, but emotionally. A space inside him, that had been carefully controlled for decades, moved. The response. "I think I cannot keep Benny," he said carefully. The child shook her head, with the patience of someone explaining something very obvious. "You don't keep him," she said. "You just hold him for a bit." A small pause. "Then you give him back." The unthinkable. And so, Ambassador Quellix of the Melurian Republic, career diplomat, veteran negotiator, decorated official, sat in a quiet corridor and accepted a one-eared stuffed animal. The conversation. The child sat beside him, close, comfortable, unafraid, and began talking about school, about friends, about something called math homework, which she clearly disliked, about a teacher she liked, about a game she had played. Simple things, small things, human things. The shift. Quellix listened. Not because he had to. Not because it was strategic. But because it grounded him. Each word, each small story, pulled him out of the weight, out of the failure, out of the moment, and into something lighter, understanding. He held Benny carefully, as if it were fragile, as if it mattered, because it did, not for what it was, but for what it represented. Comfort, connection, presence, the return. Eventually, the child stood, reached for Benny. Feel better? She asked. Quellix paused, considered, then said, yes. And for the first time since leaving the conference hall, it was true. The next day, he did not return to negotiations that evening. But the next morning, he did. The change. He requested a recess extension. Not standard. Not expected. Granted. Then, he changed his approach. Not dramatically, but fundamentally. The new opening. He did not begin with terms, or demands, or positions. He began with people. The 3,000 families. The uncertainty. The children. The ones waiting. The ones sitting on their own benches, hoping someone would not forget them. The effect. The room changed, subtly, but unmistakably. The tone softened. The resistance shifted, because he was no longer arguing to win. He was speaking to connect. The outcome. The negotiations reopened, and 11 days later, they concluded successfully. The question. The Melurian press asked him, what changed your approach? Quellix paused for a long time, then said, I was reminded that the purpose of a negotiation is not to win. A breath. It is to make sure no one has to sit alone on a bench. The confusion. No one fully understood. Not the media. Not the officials. Not even his own colleagues. But they did not need to. Epilogue. For the rest of his career, on his desk, between the flags, the awards, the formal portraits, sat a small worn stuffed toy, with mismatched eyes, and a missing ear. Final thought. Because sometimes, the most important lessons in diplomacy are not learned in conference halls, but in quiet corridors, from small voices and simple kindness.